In this tutorial, we're going to compare the two main methodologies for developing software, the waterfall model and Agile. There are many variations of these methodologies that have been given different names, like Prince2, Extreme Programming, and DevOps, but ultimately they are all a flavor of either waterfall or Agile software development. In short, Waterfall and Agile are opposite approaches to software development that offer entirely different benefits to suit different situations. The waterfall model is a highly structured methodology that provides clear insights to how projects are to be implemented. The focus of this methodology is the separation of each type of activity into a dedicated phase of the project, with each stage providing highly detailed documentation. The key characteristics of this approach to software development include clearly defined stages of the project that are executed consecutively to each other. That is, each stage starts after the completion of the previous stage. Planning for the system and project activities are performed in advance. This means that the final outcome is fully defined before any software development is started. Development of the software must adhere to the plan. The highly structured nature of waterfall projects means that it becomes more complicated to deviate from the plan as the project progresses. Testing is provided with a dedicated stage in the project where all features and use cases of the software are thoroughly tested. And the project is concluded with a single deployment after the completion of the full definition, development, and testing of the software system. The structured approach and organization of this methodology provides several key outcomes that can be used to your advantage. These are: detailed documentation provides evidence of project activities. This is an advantage for providing answers to questions regarding legal obligations and political issues. Demonstrating a plan of action through the documentation makes it easier for people to make predictions and understand what has already happened in the project. Evidence is recorded for all notable project activities. This is essential for the types of projects where mistakes can result in catastrophic consequences, such as safety-critical systems and financial systems. Such evidence can be used as a checklist to confirm the completion of essential requirements, as well as creating a paper trail to identify who has been responsible for the work. This evidence of accountability is also a reason why the waterfall model is favorable for projects that involve high amounts of politics. And finally, it sets clear expectations. The detailed documentation allows details about the expected outcome, timescale, and costs to be easily communicated. This communication is highly valued by stakeholders in the project, who often don't have the technical knowledge to form their own conclusions. It's important to keep stakeholders such as customers and project sponsors informed so that they remain confident, especially when they have the ability to cancel the project at any time. However, despite its strengths for addressing political and legal requirements, the waterfall model is very weak for developing the actual product. This is because it suffers from difficulty to change plans that have been set. The heavy emphasis on thorough planning from the start of the project means that any changes are likely to break the plan. In the real world, unexpected changes are guaranteed in projects, and the longer a project takes to complete, the more changes are likely to occur. Inflexible implementation is encouraged by excessive planning that implies the requirements have been finalized in the first stage of the waterfall model. The constant change that affects real projects means that requirements will evolve in response to situations and the discovery of new information. These changes have a habit of impacting every phase of the waterfall model from design and development to testing and deployment. But when code is being written to meet a specific set of requirements that were assumed not to change, there is a high risk of breaking the software system when changing code that was not written with the ability to be changed. Excessive time and budget is required to produce the level of documentation demanded by the waterfall model. While this documentation is an excellent tool for providing the perception of progress being made, it is created at the expense of being able to make real progress in creating the software system to be delivered. Where time or budget is limited, functionality and testing of the software system must be sacrificed to make the documentation possible. This results in either a software system with reduced functionality, or worse, a software system with faulty functionality. Feedback from real users will be too late for any significant change to be made. This is because end users will only be able to use the software after it has been fully developed. What sounds good on paper often doesn't translate to being good in practicality. This can lead to situations where time is wasted on functionality that is never used, or functionality that doesn't provide the required features to be effective. And finally, change can become impossible, created as a result of inflexible implementation, but where the system has been designed in a way that can only cater to the original requirements. In the worst case scenario, this would mean that the entire project has to be restarted. From beginning to the end of the project, each stage is executed as its own stage. And while in theory it would be possible to revisit any of the stages after their completion, the reality is that most projects are too complicated to do this. In contrast, Agile projects are less organized and more focused on creating the end product than producing the documentation. Less organized doesn't need to mean unorganized, just not excessively organized to the extent of waterfall projects. Agile projects are able to deliver more of the end product by avoiding the creation of unnecessary documentation and starting the development at the earliest opportunity. This allows Agile projects to benefit from rapid implementation because the distraction of excessive documentation can be avoided. This means that more time is available for developing the software and to start the creation of functionality at the earliest opportunity. Early feedback is made possible from the faster development of the software. Instead of having to wait until the completion of the development phase, early versions of the software functionality can be provided to end users as they are developed. This allows user feedback to be integrated into the next stages of design and development, as well as identifying features that may not be required. Agile is all about being reactive to changing requirements, mainly because software development begins without an understanding of the full requirements, only the immediate requirements. Software features are only designed and developed when they are required, meaning that new features can be requested at any time. Uncertainty about future requirements is embraced as part of the criteria for all stages in the project, meaning that functionality is designed, developed, and deployed in a way that anticipates the likeliness of needing to be changed in the future. This results in a software system that is easier to modify whenever changes are required. And finally, limited paperwork makes more time available for creating the software and avoids important information being lost between excessive amounts of irrelevant documentation. But Agile methodology is not perfect either. Its emphasis on efficiently and accurately delivering the end product comes at a cost to political requirements. No long-term planning means that it will be difficult or impossible to answer many of the questions that stakeholders want answers to. Minimized documentation results in minimal evidence of activities. This becomes a problem when there is a dispute, such as identifying why a project is running late and over budget, or where there is an investigation into the project for legal requirements. Unpredictability can lose the confidence of stakeholders. Agile is highly focused on addressing immediate concerns of the project and only considers long-term issues when they become immediate. This is a big problem when project sponsors, clients, and other stakeholders are concerned about the consequences of the project failing to meet delivery dates and budget constraints. In the worst case scenario, stakeholders can decide to cancel the project in favor of other more predictable options. And finally, there is limited protection against politics that emerge throughout the project. This should be obvious from all of the previously mentioned disadvantages. Politics occur with anything that involves people, and the antidote to politics is strongly documented evidence. While Agile projects focus on producing the end product without distractions of creating excessive documentation, the reduction of documentation is also the reduction of evidence to support politics. Agile projects tend to be run in sprints that look similar to the waterfall model. The main difference with Agile is that the entire process of the waterfall model can occur within one sprint. Many of these sprints are executed between the start and end of the project. Unlike the waterfall model, each sprint focuses on creating or modifying just one feature of the system. Sprints are meant to be highly specific and completed in a very short amount of time, typically over a week or so. Each sprint results in the client and other stakeholders being able to see tangible progress in the project. This, in turn, allows for more accurate feedback to be received based on real use of the software system, avoiding bad decisions being made on theoretical opinions. Let's compare both of these approaches for software development. Waterfall-style development is ideal for projects where risk is a concern, either during the project's implementation or use of the resulting software system. Detailed documentation and planning adds an extra layer of safety to make sure that safe processes are used throughout the project. Bureaucratic and legal requirements must be addressed. The success of these projects is primarily based on documented evidence. That is, if it's not documented, it's not trusted to be complete. And in the worst case scenario, documentation is a political tool to identify who is responsible for failures. Planning is highly valued as part of the delivery. This is often motivated by fear of consequences, especially when stakeholders don't have the technical knowledge to judge for themselves. Documented plans are a tool for stakeholders to justify the decisions they make. Limited scope for change means that rigid planning doesn't become too much of an obstacle to completing the project. And excess time and budget is available to invest into the documentation, planning, and extended requirements to implement change. The types of projects that are best suited to using waterfall software development include simple projects, government projects, and corporate projects. While simple projects can be completed quickly enough not to be affected by change requirements, government and corporate projects benefit from the ability to use documentation to control perceptions of the project being successful, and in the worst case scenarios, to use documentation as evidence to blame specific people for the project's failures. Meanwhile, Agile is better suited to projects where risk is limited to a point where failures have no serious consequences. There is freedom from bureaucracy, opening more creativity in the development process to focus on activities that directly progress the development of the software system. Tangible results are most valued, that is, working versions of the software and not just documented ideas. Change is an expectation of the project. partially because the full set of requirements are unknown, but also having the willingness to accept that agendas for the project can also change at any time. And finally, limited time and budget is available to implement the project, meaning that the efficiencies created by focusing on development with limited documentation will define what is possible to deliver. Projects that benefit most from agile development are those that are not obliged to address legal and political concerns. These tend to be anything from hobby projects and coursework assignments to small business and open source projects. The main characteristic of projects that benefit from agile software development is where success can only be defined by the delivery of a functioning product within a limited time frame. In summary, Agile and Waterfall are opposite models for software development. Waterfall is designed to address politics and bureaucracy. Agile is designed to complete the product efficiently. Projects fail when perceptions are not managed. Projects also fail when functionality is not accurately developed. There is no perfect software development method, and choose the method that best fits the situation.